Hey y'all, Moses here. You guys like videos? This is what I do, man. I'm making videos. This is the third video of today. I'm aware of it. I hope you guys like. What I had done. I did the aiming guide. You can check that out. I did the patch notes recap video and showed you some gameplay there. And I reflected and I said, you know what, YouTube is missing today? Some footage of my giant head. So what I wanted to do, since I spent some time on the PUBG Discord talking to some of the community about the patch and some of the changes, I wanted to do a bit of a more deep dive than I could do on the patch notes recap video, since Vault Dude absolutely smoked me. He was clearly faster. I was up late making the aiming guide until about 12:30 at night. And the patch notes dropped at 1 a.m. So you win this time, Vault Dude. You win this time, my man. So let's look at some of the changes. I want to talk a little bit about the changes to the SKS and the changes to the looting system, as well as some of the other little things that I didn't, again, have a chance to jump into too much in the other video. So with that said, let's jump in here. So I wanted to speak first about the SKS. So the SKS is getting lower rail attachment. Hold on, let me make this big for y'all. The SKS is getting lower rail attachments. If you didn't know that, I guess you probably already saw that, so whatever. So that means that now you could likely put under barrel and grips, I guess, are the only thing really that would go on there. So you can put grips on the SKS now, which is a pretty big change. With that, I think the SKS is going to move from the shitty sniper to the mediocre single fire, maybe more viable than the AK assault rifle. So let's talk a bit about the SKS from a baseline stats perspective. It shoots faster. Hold on a minute here. Let me pull up my old stats page. PUBG stats. I can't remember what it is. Let's go to we'll go to PUBG.me here. I want to check the sniper rifles. Okay, so yes, it has an 800 meters per second initial bullet speed compared to the Kar 98, which is 760, and the M24, which is 790. So comparing that to the AK has an initial bullet speed of 715, whereas the M16 has the highest initial bullet velocity at 900. So it falls basically between the SCAR and the AK, so at about 800 meters per second. So it has a higher bullet velocity than the AK, which is important. So the AK's biggest problem right now is its control and bullet velocity at longer than medium distance. So I would say anything beyond 150 meters, hitting a moving target can be a little bit difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying skilled players can't do it, but it is harder to do than with the M16, which requires far less lead time. I don't know why I'm showing you this Ryzen processor. Oh, by the way, the streaming PC is coming along quite nicely, so soon we'll have it. Back to the old patch notes, where I'm not sponsored by AMD, I promise. So the SKS is going to slot into, I believe, an alternative for an AK or potentially even a regular AR. I think that preferably, or my preference, based on the fact that I single fire my AK almost all the time, I may prefer to have the SKS. I don't think that the SKS is going to be more readily available from a loot perspective, but I also wonder if this is a bit of a test to see how the Mark 14 EBR, the new SKS, is going to do. Or what we might see from the Mark 14 later, if it is determined that it is okay to come out of just a weapons crate. But the Mark 14 doesn't have underbarrel attachments currently, so maybe the Mark 14 is just the spiritual successor to the SKS. And they're just kind of testing to see how the SKS balances in its current state, and maybe the Mark 14 will see the same change down the line, and we'll have more variants of the DMR type just available out in the world, which would be great. So how would I anticipate, and the test server got delayed, so I can't really test it, but hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to get out there and try this out. I'm thinking that the SKS will be a good alternative in the sense that you can have an underbarrel attachment, because the recoil in the SKS is definitely its biggest detractor from a use standpoint. You can have the cheek pad. I don't think that the tactical stock is going to be applied to the SKS. It'll probably still be the cheek pad. And then you'll have the compensator or the silencer, depending on your preference. A compensated, gripped cheek pad SKS is going to have fairly low recoil. At least that's what I understand, or what I anticipate. In any estimation, I believe that the SKS is gonna see a big uptick in the meta. I know you guys say that PUBG doesn't have a meta. I believe it does. Okay, I think it does. There's a meta out there, and I believe in it. But I think the SKS is gonna see an uptick in use, especially for myself, depending on the new recoil and how it handles. I single tap the AK, and it has the advantage in bullet speed. I think it's going to be a pretty viable gun coming up here. The VSS, this is something I didn't mention in the patch notes, has had its reload time decreased, which makes sense because it has the longest goddamn reload of any of the sniper rifles for no reason. I'm not going to use it, but now it reloads faster, so lucky us. Similarly, the pump shotgun, I mentioned this in the other video as well, but it's had its firing delay eliminated after a reload. So one of the big issues for me, and this is going to segue into my next point, is that when you land in a place like the school, you pick up the pump shotgun, you're loading it, you'll have that like 1 or 2, well, basically a 1 second delay where you have to cock the gun and be able to fire it. That frequently means death, especially in a place like the school. So having the reload time essentially reduced by eliminating that firing delay is going to be definitely helpful to increasing its viability as an early game weapon. I don't think that the fire rate will necessarily improve, but we'll see how that kind of affects the shotgun meta. So anyways, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the reduced cast time on the first aid kit and the med kit. So the first aid kit, the first aid kit and painkillers, and the med kit and the adrenaline syringe. The energy drink is staying the same, as are the bandages, but the first aid kit is now being cast in 6 seconds versus 8 seconds, and the adrenaline kit and med kit, adrenaline syringe and med kit are being reduced from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. So this is a pretty big change. A lot of how I play the game is aggressive. So if I'm in a fight that is at medium range and I need to close distance on someone I've injured, I know that I have 8 seconds of basically free time while they are either med kitting or bandaging or what have you, just medding up. Those extra 2 seconds is a lot. You could cover up to, I think, 25 or 30 meters in those 2 seconds. So that's 25 or 30 meters you have to now be aware of when you're approaching an enemy, that they might be fully meted and ready to get back at you. So that's definitely going to increase the pace of gunfights. And that's a change that will increase survivability, but I don't really know why this change was implemented. I don't know why they decided that the cast time was too long. Maybe it was just to give players a bit more of an advantage in those medium range gunfights, and increasing your survivability essentially. I think that on top of that, this affects the circles as well, because being able to cast first aid kits faster in a later game circle might mean that you might be able to marathon circles a little bit faster, because when you're getting chunked by the circle, those 2 seconds, either in the med kit, most likely the first aid, is huge. That's a huge benefit to be able to tank the circle a little bit longer, and potentially make it back into the play zone. So before we continue with the patch notes, I want to jump over to something that was mentioned in the developer digest this week on Reddit, and that is the blue zones being worked on. The goal is to make you die to other players 90% of the time. So that source is a developer on Twitter somewhere. I don't know where it was mentioned, but the idea is that they want you to survive the blue zones more. So maybe this medkit change or this first aid change is a step in that direction. Speaking of upcoming changes, it has been stated that a major overhaul for the grenade system, including smoke grenades, is planned for next month's patch. So the grenade system is being looked at potentially for August's patch, or September. I don't know, the next monthly patch, monthly update number 5. So interesting to see that. And beyond that, the FOV slider coming in this monthly update is limited to the first person only. That's not something that was mentioned, I believe, in the patch notes, but let's jump back over to there. So the FOV slider, I'm looking forward to first person, man. I think that I've made my point clear in some of my streams and in some of the videos I've made that first person is going to add a new competitive aspect to PUBG, in the sense that, and reading your comments on the videos, I'm not saying that competitive third person and competitive first person need to operate independently of each other. You can be just as competitive in third person as you can in first person, but some of the fairness aspects, and the question I received is, well, how is third person not fair? Everyone has the same opportunity to use it. Well, let me put it this way. If you're in one of the final circles and there's a tree and you're in a field, what's more fair? The third person, the guy behind the tree, or the guy in the field? Sure, you can see the tree, but he can see you and he has cover and he doesn't have to peek you. That's where the fairness comes in. So eliminating that aspect and the ability to have 100% vision, we've been over this. Let's move on. So the next thing I want to talk about is the change to loot. So in the sense that they've now made it so dragging and dropping has a delay. So what does that mean? That basically means that, and this is me asking the community team in the PUBG Discord, is that when you drag and drop, now the animation is going to play. So they tried to do this a little while ago, I believe, not in the last monthly patch. I think they tried to do this and then reverted the change before the patch went live, where it would freeze you in place and play the animation. Now they've changed the looting animation in one of the most recent weekly updates, where you can move and hit F at the same time. I haven't had a great experience with that personally. I don't know about you guys, but if you are on the move and hit F on an item and you move too far away, it doesn't pick it up. So my concern is not being able to move and drag and drop at the same time. So that's a lot of commands at once. You're going to have to, tab into the loot, move around, and drag and drop at the same time. That's a skill. That's a practice thing. So the question I put is that in the patch note, let me see if I can find it here. Loot. Drag. There we go. Added a slight delay when using the drag and drop feature on items in the inventory UI. We implemented this delay to provide a fair gameplay environment to all players. I don't necessarily agree with this fairness angle, in the sense that just like aiming, shooting, jumping, clicking and dragging items quickly is a learned skill that you can practice. Knowing where the items allocate in the UI, dragging and dropping is a skill. Everyone can do it. All you have to do is hit the same buttons. It's the same as aiming for a headshot or sniping. That's a bit of hyperbolic, but at the same time, it's a skill. So I'm not sure why they're messing with this system, because that's an under the radar huge change. If you're having to loot quickly in an end game scenario where you're dragging and dropping, playing the animation over and over again while you're doing it is going to slow you down significantly. So is that actually fair? I don't know. And being able to move at the same time, hopefully, if you can move and do it at the same time, I can kind of understand it. But I'm gonna look at the advantage and disadvantage of looting, at the sense that I believe it's on the developers to make it fair that if you hit F or drag, it should take the same. It should loot at the same time. So maybe adding that animation is how they're achieving that. But frequently when I hit F on an item, again using the school as an example in the early game, if I hit F on an item and another guy beside me drags and drops, I can tell from my experience that dragging and dropping will win the loot a lot faster, or a lot more often than the person hitting F. I had to learn to stop hitting F at all in the school once I started dropping there more to practice aiming and whatnot, because I would just get murdered all the time because the person dragging and dropping would pick up the weapon. So if that animation is playing, my preference would be that the loot enters your inventory when you hit F on the item, not when it ducks down to pick it up, like that half second later when you're picking the item up. It should loot instantly, and then play the animation. That way there's no issue with desync and lag, because in the school, if you hit F on at the same time as someone else, a lot of the time you'll lose that item. So dragging and dropping is a necessity. So I'm not super happy about that change. I don't know how that's really gonna play out in the future. I don't like when they mess with stuff like that. So we'll see what happens. So they've improved the camera transition when disabling free look feature. So when you let go of Alt, it should not. Hopefully this means that your player doesn't move around a bit. So that's another big change, because free look and Alt look are super important. But again, in the late game, or when you're trying to conceal yourself via prone, if you look left and let go of the Alt key, your camera shifts and your player shifts as well. So hopefully that's the change that they're referring to. What else did I want to talk about? The fact that you can now report players, I believe, in game is going to be awesome. I think that's something that's going to streamline the reporting process a lot more. I don't necessarily know how that's going to work, or how they're going to handle the reports from a back-end perspective. And I also don't know what kind of options they're going to have for reporting. Can you report a stream sniper in game? Is that possible? Is that an option? Because, oh man, I hope not. We don't want to talk about that anymore. So players being able to re-enter the games after they've been disconnected, that's a big change as well. Some other little changes I wanted to talk about are the grenades. So one thing I'm trying to understand with how this has been worded is you can add new keybinds to use specific throwables. Now that's a bit general from a language perspective, but essentially what I'm thinking and what I'm hoping is that if you can bind, like say G to grenade, that when you hit the G key, you automatically start throwing a grenade, like in Battlefield or another game of that nature where you can hit a key and throw a grenade. That would add to, like, this is again is maybe a step in the direction towards them improving the grenade system, that you can just chuck a grenade. Now the grenades themselves are not in great shape right now, but that's a pretty big quality of life key as well, because throwing flashbangs, smoke grenades, you have to cycle through the grenade, make sure you got the right one, look at the UI, then chuck it. So there is some delay, some barrier to throwing the right grenade. So we'll see how that goes. Now, as far as the options to display your helmet, vest, and backpack equipped on the HUD UI, I don't know if this is meant to monitor durability, or if it's to be something for squad. Like, can you see your squad's UI, armor, helmet stuff? Because that would be great for squads to see your team's armor and their durability as well. As a person who typically squad leads, I would like to be able to monitor my teammates and their durability and their vests and whatnot, so you can kind of get an idea as to what your squad effectiveness is as far as armor or even weapons, because that's also something that you can have. I'm thinking that this might look more like Counter-Strike's UI, where you can see your weapons on the right hand side, and see what you have equipped and what you have as far as potentially ammo, grenades, what have you. So the only other thing I'm interested in from a change perspective, and I wanted to talk about, is something very small, but that's the scoping noise. Apparently now, when you scope into your weapon, it's going to make an audible noise. So if you're, again, sniping in a window and you're not walking around, if you can hear a person's scope, that's kind of an audio cue that they're going to be potentially vulnerable. So interesting change. I don't know, like right now the reload sound, if you're right next to someone, you can hear it. But is that going to be the same distance for the scope? If you're right next to them, can you hear them scope in? And the real question is what does looking down a scope sound like? Like, what is that? Like, what is the noise of raising your gun to look down the weapon sight? I don't really know, but I guess we'll find out. Yeah, so that's kind of it. All I wanted to talk about as far as the deep dive on the patch notes. I don't know. I'm happy with some of the changes. The SKS specifically, that was something I hoped for in my video covering the new weapon. But from an optimization standpoint, fences, doors, and windows, Please, God, let me shoot through the fences. I just want to shoot through the fence. Let me show you something real quick. Let me just show you. This is sponsored by AMD. No, it's not. It's not, I promise. I want to show you this clip, and this is something I posted to Reddit myself. But this is what I'm talking about when I hope that the fences have changed. So let's take a look at this bad boy here. Sorry for the quality. This quality is awful, actually. Just pretend this is... Motherfucking fences! Oh, I just broke the YouTube rules there. I'm sorry for swearing. So yeah, hopefully that's the change that we're waiting for as far as fences and windows, because you know we all hit the windows and whatnot. So anyway, that's all I really wanted to talk about. I'm sure you guys have had enough of me and my voice today. So leave a comment if you want. Like the video. Join me on Twitch, twitch.tv/wtfmoses. Thanks for taking the time. Let me know what you guys think. All right, I'll check you later.